طيب احنا we talked about الفكرة linear عامة. we said in anything that has to do with linear functions we think about slopes right away. and we talked about how to calculate the slope. واحنا قلنا ان في حسب الجيفن. لو انا given points او graph او table, there is the one way to calculate the slope اللي هو y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. أو we could be be given one of the equations اللي هما y equals mx plus b أو ax plus by equals c أو y minus y1 equals m bracket x minus x1. These were the equations. وافتكرنا أو اتكلمنا كمان على فكرة إن لو الإيكويشن في الستاندرد فورم دي السلوب بيكون نيجاتيف الرقم اللي جنب الإكس أوفر الرقم اللي جنب الواي. والواي انترسبت بيكون سي اوفر بي اللي هو الرقم اللي بره اوفر الرقم اللي جنب الواي. So when you read those questions, it says for a linear function, f of 0 equals 2 and f of 3. So whenever you see linear, we think of slope. طيب, what are we given? What is f? What does that mean, f of 0 equals 2? This is x and this is y. This could be written as a point. 0 على x, 2 على y. This is a point. Well, this is another point. 3 على x, 5 على y. So أنا كده عندي points. So على طول هفكر في السلوب using this form. أعمل y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 هيطلع لي السلوب ب 1. What I got now is the slope. طيب, what do they want? They want f of 5. يبقى أنا محتاج أعرف الفانكشن نفسها أصلا ال f of x هي إيه؟ الإيكويشن نفسها إيه؟ So what do I know about the equations of the linear functions? إنها y equals mx plus b. I got the m. I know now it's 1. So بقت y equals 1x which is x plus b. طيب I need كده إيه؟ I need ال b بكام؟ ال b is the y intercept as we discussed قبل كده. ال y intercept is the point where the graph intersects the y axis, البوينت دي. أي point على ال y axis ال x coordinate بتاعتها بزيرو. What does that mean؟ يعني أي point تبقى ال x بتاعتها بزيرو، الرقم اللي هنا ده this is the y intercept right away. فأنا هنا في الكيس دي عندي البوينت دي، عندي هنا ال x بزيرو which means إن ال 2 دي هي دي ال y intercept، هي دي ال b. فأنا كده عندي الإيكويشن y equals x plus 2. This is the actual function. هو عايز f of 5 يبقى أشيل ال x وأحط 5 تبقى 5 plus 2 يعني 7. The answer here is 7. Does this make sense ولا لا؟ عشان لسه هقول طريقة تانية but make sure إن you understand this one الأول. معلش يا حبيبتي صوتك بعيد. Can you say that again? Of course. طيب, so what we did is the following. أول whenever we started reading the question we realized the word linear we started thinking of the slope. So we were searching for what's given. Is it the points or graph or table or is it an equation? So when we checked, we realized that f of 0 equals 2 and f of 3 equals 5, those two are considered points. So we used method A then, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. F of 0 equals 2, it means x, when x was equals 0, y was equals 2. So this is a point. And here when x was equals to 3, y was equals to 5. They want to know what is the value of k if f of 5 is equals to k. So how can I find f of 5? I need to know the f of x, the function itself, which is, because it's a linear function, it's f of x equals mx plus b because it's linear. So I realized خلاص I needed to get the slope. I got the slope first, which is 1, and I substituted, instead of the m, I substituted 1. Now what I'm missing is the y-intercept. In order to find the y-intercept, because I'm already given a point that has the x coordinate equals to 0, which is this point here, it has the x coordinate equals to 0, then this means that whenever any point in the world has a point equals to 0, has the x, sorry, equals to 0, the y here is the y-intercept. So I'm already kind of given the y-intercept in an indirect way. I took the y-intercept and I substituted it here instead of the b. Once I did that, I was able to substitute. They need f of 5. I substituted the x with 5 to find f of 5, which got me the answer as 7. So that is the value of k. Does this make sense? Are you sure? Type. There is another method though, and it's a very important perspective to look at all linear functions, okay? Any line in the world, let's say it has 3 points, for example, let's say point A and point B and point C. If I calculated the slope using point A and point B, it must be equals to the slope using point B and point C. Or it must be equals to the slope using point A and point C as well. And if I picked any 2 points on the line, they must give me exactly the same slope. And I can use this idea in this question. Say, we already got the slope here as 1 between these 2 points, this one and that one. Now there is a third point, which is the one wanted, that has the 5 equals, sorry, that has the x equals to 5 and has the y as the unknown. This is the k. This is the third point, 5 and k. So I used these 2 points to calculate the slope. It must be equals to the slope of, for example, these 2 points as well, or these 2 points. So I can say that this one, which is the slope using those blue points, must be equal to the slope using the first and the last point, which is k minus 2 over 5 minus 0. I did y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. It must be equals to 1. Now I can solve this as an equation. Now this means that k minus 2 over 5 is equals to 1. I can move the 5 to the other side, which means I'll have k minus 2 equals 5, and then move the negative 2 to the other side, which will give me k equals 7 right away. So I have the value of k. Instead of getting the equation and then substituting x with 5. Does this other method make sense as well or la? Jana, are you good? Type. It's very important to understand both methods, because at some points you could be able to get the equation and so on, which is a very long procedure, by the way. And in other times it's much faster, of course, to do the slope thing, where you use the fact that any 2 points on the same line must have the same slope. Some other times you will be asked just to find the equation, so you should be able to know how to find the equation as well. يعني مرات هيبقى الchoices, which one of the choices is the equation, which will be this one as the correct one. So you should be able to find the slope and find the y-intercept, which is the full equation. You should be also able to use the slope to find any missing coordinate in the third point on the line. Type. If you check this one, this uses exactly this perspective that we're just talking about. It gave you a table of x and f of x, and it told you already that f is a linear function. And we said whenever we see the word linear, we think about the slope. So let's start and get the slope using any 2 points. For example, let's use these 2. And we're going to say that 12 minus a over 1 minus 0, this is the slope of the first 2 points. That should be equal to the slope of the second 2 points, or the second with the third, I mean. So it must be equals to b minus 12 over 2 minus 1. These must be equals to each other, which means now I'm able to create an equation. I have an equation. So let's try and change شوية في شكل الإيكويشن because they're asking for A plus B, which means I need to put the A and the B next to each other in this equation. How can I do so? Now 12 minus A when simplified, 1 minus 0, sorry, when simplified is 1. And B minus 12 over 2 minus 1 is just 1 as well. 12 minus A over 1 is just 12 minus A. And B minus 12 over 1 is just B minus 12. Again, I need to put the A and the B on the same side. So I'll move the negative A الناحية التانية والnegative 12 to this side. I'll have here 12 plus 12 equals A plus B, which means that A plus B now is equals to 24. And this is what they were looking for, 24. What is the value of A plus B? Does this make sense to you? Yes.
This makes sense. When I solved it in a different way.
Of course, it works.
But I want to know if this way would work with other stuff, or if it was just by chance it worked on this one.
لا, tell me what happened.
I did it if x is 0, then A is
the y integer.
هي هتبقى 0 and then 1 is 12.
لا, no, so wait. You're talking that A must be equals to 0 as well?
لا, and A is like 0, right?
A is equals to 0?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
12 is يعني equals 1, 12 is like a 1, and then B
2 must be 24.
B is like twice because like it's 2. But I did it as in like if it would be A اللي هو يعني A is that.
I got your point. Now let me best tweak a bit in how things are called and so on. Now there's what you're talking about is right, but the only incorrect thought or idea in mind is assuming that A must be equals to 0. We don't know the value of A, and it could be, by the way, that it's not equals to 0. The only thing that we're sure of, because this is linear, is that the same difference between this A and this 12 is the same exact difference between 12 and B, which is exactly what we did here, by the way. Yani, in other words, B minus 12 must be exactly equal, this difference must be exactly equals to the other difference. And now I have an equation and I can just move this here and this there, and I'll have A plus B equals 24 right away. Not by assuming that the A specifically is equals to 0 and the B is equals to 24. لأنه ممكن تكون, for example, by the way, A could be equals to negative 5.
And I meant then like f of 0 equals A.
F of 0 is equals to A. So if f of 1 is equals to 12, then you're talking that whatever change that happened here should happen there, right?
Yes.
And you said that's why it's supposed to be the same 12 again. So you said 12 plus 12. So you assumed in this case that this is 0.
Okay.
Mentally, فاهمة؟ But the thought of the difference is correct, is 100% true. So the difference between the 12 and the B is true. So you can just write it as an equation this way and then solve it. Because as I just said, if A is equals to negative 5, by the way, then 17, 20, then this should be 29. The difference between the A and this is still 24. And when you add A and B, sorry, it's not the difference. When you add A and B, it will still give you the same 24. Even though A is not equals to 0, A is equals to negative 5. You understand my point?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it doesn't matter what the value of A is, and it doesn't matter what the value of B is. The easiest and fastest فعلا way to look at it is that this difference between from A to B, because this is the same difference, we keep adding 1 here, and we keep adding 1 there, then whatever we add here must be added there as well, the same difference here. So we can come up with an equation and we say that B minus 12, this difference must be equals to this difference. And we came up with this one. Now when you solve the equation, you'll get to the same exact answer, that A plus B is equals to 24. And to be honest, this method, the red one, is much even faster than that one, than the blue one. The only reason why I used the blue one It's because I wanted you to what's it called يعني memorize somehow or link على طول somehow the word linear with slope specifically, because in most of the questions the slope would work whether it's about the differences between points or not. But this method would sometimes work in some questions, and in other questions this wouldn't be useful. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But to be honest, definitely the red one is much faster and quicker and precise and correct. Jana, انت فاهمة everything? Thank you so much.
Yeah.
طيب حاسس انك بتعديها لي. يس كمل بس انت مالكش دعوة.
والله فاهمة.
ماشي يا عمر. So number 3, it says this is a linear function given this equation. So this is the equation of the linear function that they used: ax plus by but plus c equals to 0. And then they said that the a must be bigger than 0, the b is less than 0, and the c is bigger than 0. I want to make sure that you remember this quite well. In all the SAT and standardized tests generally, whenever they mention that something is bigger than 0 or smaller than 0, the only idea there is to tell you whether it's positive or negative. يعني don't think of specific numbers, you can just think of whether they're positive or negative وخلاص. And at the same time, of course, you can substitute numbers instead if you want, and you can try out numbers, but make sure that they follow the conditions that they said, that the a must be bigger than 0, which means the a must be positive. If you use the number, you use a positive number. B must be less than 0, which means negative. So if you use the number, it must be a negative, and so on. Whenever you're trying out or you are using specific random numbers from your own creation, try to avoid the number 1 always. Try to avoid the number 2 as well always. Try out something bigger. Okay? Anyway, it says here which of the following best represents the graph below. So first of all, what form of equation is this? This is not even the standard, not the slope intercept, and not the point slope. Because the standard form قلنا انه المفروض يكون ax plus by equals رقم. So ما فيش حاجة جنب ال ax ما فيش حاجة جنب ال x وال y. So this means in the first I need to move the c to the other side. It must be only x and y on one side equals to negative c. This is the correct equation in the standard form. But what do we know about those equations? We know that the slope out of this is supposed to be equals negative a over b, while the y-intercept is supposed to be equals negative c, which is this number here, over b, this number there. Yani we only switch the sign of the number next to the x, but the b and the c will be taken with the same signs as they are. So they told me that a is positive. When I use negative a, then this is now negative over the b. They said that the b is negative. So this is now negative over negative, which means that the slope must be a positive number. That's what I know about the slope now. The slope must be positive. Do you understand what I just did now? Yes.
Mister,
Yes.
why is it negative over negative?
You're talking about this negative. What? Okay. So the a itself is what is positive, correct?
Yes.
But when I get the slope out of the standard form, earlier we said we should take the number next to the x, but with the opposite sign, correct?
Yes.
So if a is supposed to be positive, when I take it into the slope, it should be a negative number with the opposite sign. Negative a, which would make it negative number, correct?
Yes.
So now I have the a as the negative a as a negative number here. Now what about the b? The b, they said already that it's supposed to be less than 0. So it is already a negative number as well.
Okay, and I forgot about the part that says it's negative.
Okay. No worries. Right. So then the answer came out as positive. So when I look at Jana Fahma so far, before we continue, it's very important.
Yes.
Type. Now when you look at the equations, do you know the Nike sign? If the line follows the Nike sign, it's a positive sloped line. If it intersects with the line and they create an X, then it's a negative slope sign, which means that this is a negative slope, this is a negative slope line, but this is a positive slope because it goes with the Nike sign, and this one as well is a positive slope. Any graph, as long as we're reading it from left to right, as long as it's going up, it's a positive graph. So, which means I excluded choice A and choice C now. The difference between B and D is what? Is in the y-intercept. Here, the y-intercept is a negative number. But there, the y-intercept is a positive number. So I need to get the y-intercept. Remember that this is the y-intercept, negative C over B. They said that C is already supposed to be positive. So negative C will make it a negative number over. The B is already negative, as they said. So negative over negative will still make it a positive number. So that means that the y-intercept must be positive as well, which then means that D must be the correct answer, and this one is incorrect. Does that make sense? Right. Yes.
Does this have anything to do? Is there any thing in what type quadrants that we did yesterday?
No, not much. The quadrants is basically just an information. We name the regions of the XY axis. That's all. Because there are 4 regions of any XY axis in the world, so we give them names. It's like this quarter of the XY axis is called this, and this is called that. But we move in counterclockwise, and we always start from the quarter that has all x and y as positive values. Yani we always start from this side here as quadrant 1. And then we move counterclockwise. So this is quadrant 2, and then this is quadrant 3, and then this is quadrant 4. Does this make sense? So the quadrants thing is not really something to memorize or to do something like that. It's just an information to keep in mind. Now, the fact that we discussed yesterday that these quadrant 1 has x and y as positive coordinates and quadrant 2 has x as positive, y as negative, these are information that khalas now makes sense right away, because you know that this is what we call quadrant 2, so you know that this is positive, negative on the x, while this is positive on the y. So then quadrant 2 will always have negative x and positive y. But what we're talking about here has nothing to do with the position of the line. Where does it lie, or where does it intersect? Is it in quadrant 1 or 2? It has to do with whether the slope and the intercept of the line are positive or negative. It could be related, of course. We can relate it to the quadrants. For example, any positive line with positive y-intercept must cross quadrant 1, 2, and 3. So this is not a rule. Yeah, there's no point of us discussing this as a rule and you memorizing it. This is something you, khalas, now you can notice. This is positive, therefore it must, this is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3. I noticed that the positive line passes through quadrant 1, 2, and 3, and it doesn't pass through quadrant 4. That's fine. It's just something that I noticed. But it shouldn't be something to memorize, because at this point it would be too many information at the same time. One more thing to say just quickly. In one question, one time a question came up like this. They said there's this line L, and line L is a negative slope line with a positive y-intercept, negative slope and positive y-intercept. And then they asked which quadrant does this lie? This line does not pass through. And quadrant does this line does not pass through. So you think you do a quick draft. It's a negative slope line, so it goes this way. It's a positive y-intercept, so it must be up, not down. It must be in the upper one. So apparently it crosses quadrant 1, quadrant 2, and quadrant 4, but it doesn't cross quadrant 3. So yes, 3 is the answer. Quadrant 3 is the answer. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And we'll see hopefully questions like those. Because I enjoy and I like, I want you to look at them as every single thing that has to do with the line is connected. Every single question that you'll see could be solved in more than one method, specifically in linear equations more than anything else. It's one of the most applied things in real life, And the rules are not that much if you understand them, not memorize them. You can manipulate this as much as you want. It would become suddenly something, one of the most interesting and easy topics. Okay, so look at it in this way, whether it's positive or negative, and in terms always of in terms of slope and y-intercept. Yani, try to relate to the slope and y-intercept because that's what we know and that's what we're good at and know how to calculate and so on. Okay. If f is a linear function, f of 3 is equals to 2. So we just learned that whenever we see something like this could, in a word of linear, or in terms of linear functions, we think of this as slope x and y. Sorry, as a point x and y, 3 and 2. This is a point, and this is another point, 5 and 6. They're asking what is the y-intercept of the graph. So which means I need to get the entire equation. I need to get the b. So I'm thinking in terms of y equals mx plus b. I need to find the slope. How to find the slope when I'm given points? y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That would get me 4 over 2, which is 2. I now have the slope. So I'll say y equals 2x plus b. How can I find the b now when I'm not given a point that has the x equals to 0? I can use any of these 2 points because every one of those has x and y, as we said. So I can put, instead of the y, for example, this 2. And instead of the x, this 3 with the 2. And I leave the b as unknown. And now I can solve to find b. I can move the 6 to the other side and get b equals to negative 4. This is the y-intercept. This is what they were looking for, negative 4. That's the answer. If I wanted to write the equation, it would be y equals 2x, which is the slope, minus 4. This is the whole equation. Does this make sense, kids? If I'm going faster than expected, stop me, please. I'm thinking and you already understand. This is a very similar question, but now they're asking for the x-intercepts. We said that the y-intercept is a point where x is equals to 0. Any point that x is equals to 0, that has x equals to 0. The x-intercept is a point that has y equals to 0. It's the other way around. So if I have the equation, I can put y equals to 0 and find the value of x. So my target now is to find this linear function. How to do so? Again, I have points, x, y, x, y. I can do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That would get me negative 4 plus 2 over 1, which is negative 2. I have the slope. I'll write the equation. Y equals negative 2x plus b. I'll use any of the points to find the b. This time, for example, I'll use this one. I'll put instead of the y, negative 4. And I'll put instead of the x, the 4, plus b. This would become negative 4 equals to negative 8 plus b. I'll move this. I'll have b equals 4. I have now the slope and I have the y-intercept. The equation is y equals negative 2x plus 4. Because I have the equation, I can easily find the x-intercept, which is the value that has the y equals to 0. So now negative 2x plus 4. I'll move 4 to this side. This is negative 4 equals to negative 2x. That would get me x equals 2. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Can someone tell me, or can any of you tell me another method to solve this question using the methods that we've already discussed? Faster, shorter methods. I'm giving you hints now, if you can.
Mister,
Yes.
when I was doing these for the homework, I solved them in a different way, but يعني هو two of them were correct, and the third one يعني this one was gonna be correct بس I second guessed it وحطيت a different answer. بس هو أنا عملته اللي هو the first one which is negative 2 take away 4, taking away -4, so then like it's gonna be -2 add 4, which is gonna be 2.
Okay. So you were talking, so you'll be moving from 3 up until 0, huh? Down. Well, is that not what it should continue? So I didn't get that right now.
يعني هو صح ال f of 3 is equals to -2.
Yes.
That is, and then f of
4 equals to -4.
is -4, فأنا I did -2, take away -4, which then becomes -2, add 4, which is then.
Why would you add 4?
عشان like that's like f of x, f of 4 equals to -4.
But from when x was equals to 3, y was equals to -2. I can write it this way. X and f of x, okay? When x was equals to 3, f of x was -2. When x was equals to 4, f of x was -4. So from when we moved from 3 to 4, every 1 unit on x changes the y decreases the y by 2. So whenever x increases by 1, the y decreases by -2, صح?
Yes.
So why would I add 4?
ما هو لا, it's like مش عارفة, I just
لا بس
بس مش عارفة اشرحها.
Not wrong. طيب بصي. So it's أصل برضو what you're thinking of is very. Here's what I'm talking about. So math is mainly what you're trying to do mentally. That's what the rules of the math were created out of. So every thought that you're thinking of, اللي هو if مادام دي زادت واحدة يبقى مش عارف دي تنقص 2, طب ما انا انقص كذا او move this way. What you're thinking of entirely is what is math. That's how we created the slope, for example. That's how we created the rule that has to do with the equation اصلا اللي هي y equals mx plus b. يعني that's how we came up with every single rule, by the reason of the common sense that we already are kind of trying to get to. So what I'm trying to do with you specifically is to get you to a point where you link the reasoning, the lower mental math, the normal common sense for you, to the rules that are exactly the same, but they're people who already found a systematic way to do it. يعني they've been thinking exactly like what you did, and then they reached this is what happens every single time. طب خلاص, then this is what we call a rule. So every thought you're talking about is true. So moving the same values, the thought that however x moved, the y's moved, I can move the same thing in the other direction, is what we call the slope. The slope is I told you yesterday, yesterday, no, not yesterday, last class, that the slope is called the average rate of change. The word average rate of change means that it's the change on the y with every 1 change of x. That's exactly what's happening here. Every 1 increase on x, the y decreases by 2. That's why the slope is -2. That's the average rate of change that's happening. The change that's happening from one point to the other on the x for the y is a change of -2. That's why the slope is rise over run, which is, we call it change of y over the change in x. Whatever the kind of change that's happening in y with every 1 change in x. So that's why when I told you Hina in this question that the difference that's happening here, which is this difference, must be the exact same difference that's happening there, because the x has been moving 1, so the slope will always remain the same. اللي هو change, the average rate of change that's happening will remain the same. Instead of thinking about it this way, we did it in this form, which is y2 minus y1, which is the difference in the y's, those two y's, over x2 minus x1, which we know that it's 1 already, equals the change between these two y's, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which we know already that it came out as 1 as well. So it's the same exact concept. What we did here is exactly what we did here. The only difference is that we knew that the change in x was 1, so we didn't write it down, which we already did when we tried to solve this. Yani, they're exactly the same idea. So when you get back to the question that we're trying to solve, the shorter way actually that could work here is the same method that we did earlier. These are points. When they give you that x is equals, what they want to know, the x-intercept, means that y will be equals to 0. They need to know what is the x value. I can use the idea of the slope. I can say that the slope between the first 2 points must be equals to the slope between the second 2 points. I can say exactly that -4 minus -2 over 4 minus 3, which is the slope between the first 2 points, must be equals to 0 minus -4 over x minus 4, which is the slope between these other 2 points. And you'll still have an equation, and you can solve it right away to find x in 1 or in 2 steps, and then that's it. -4 minus 2 is minus 2 is -2 over 1 equals 4 over x minus 4. You can cross multiply and you'll have -2x plus 8 equals 4. You'll move this, -2x equals -4. Yes, so then x is equals to 2. So you got the x equals to 2, which is the exact same answer. And I still believe that the red is much shorter. You look at the number of steps we did, every single detail, and then look at the blue ones, every single detail, and the number of times or chances you could do mistakes in the blue one is much bigger and much broader. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Not only لينا طبعا جنى. تهت يا جنى مني شوية بصراحة. طيب لينا بجد do you understand مفيش أي حاجة حسيتي إن واقعة في النص؟
Well, it's just the thing is, when you're in the test, it's to remind yourself that this is like تشبك إن هو that's how it's solved. Yeah, that's the only thing that's like confusing for me.
صح. And that is the reason why I want you to مش أنا دايما بعد حتى you've attended classes قبل كده يا لينا من زمان شوية. فبرضه I don't know if this was the case. Tell me if this was the case or لا. But I remember I always every single time I keep saying إن هو you have to know more than one way to solve the question. And it's not because إنه you'll remember one of the ways where at least يعني مثلا بدل ما تبقى عارفة طريقة واحدة تبقى عارفة 5 فتفتكري واحدة منهم. It's not because of that at all. It's just to give you a different look and view at the question itself. So that will teach you to link already whatever you're seeing in the question to different various options. And it would make it easier for you to link the words, just like what you were saying, link those words to this specific method, or link this view to that specific method, and so on. That only would happen when you actually طبعا solve a lot. And you solve a lot knowing that there is always more than one way, and I need to know them all. It's not because I know one way خلاص كده that's good. It's not because I got the answer الحمد لله مش هبص له تاني. It's not because انه مثلا لو انت عرفتي طريقه ان دايما الناس بتحب تعمل الحركه دي في questions الترايل من الاوبشنز فيها دايما بتنفع. يعني ممكن حد يجرب واحده من الاوبشن وتنفع. فالناس كلها بتحب خلاص الكويستشن ما دام ينفع اجربه خلاص يبقى مش عايز اعرف طريقه ثانيه. This is the best way to solve it. ما عنديش مانع اوكي في الامتحان ابقى اجربه، بس دلوقتي لازم تعرف 70,000 طريقه. تعرف ازاي تحله من غير choices، تعرف ازاي تحله بطريقه ثانيه وثالثه ورابعه، علشان it will teach you how to think of different questions. مش ده حتى اصلا. Does it make sense to you شويه؟ بس keep accepting انه there are options always و there are varieties وبتاع، و always use ال givens. اي حاجه given عندي بحطها في الرولز اللي انا عارفها. لقيت كلمه شفتها اعرفها زي كلمه linear، طب بفتكر ايه اللي linked بلينير؟ سلوب ادور على بوينت على ايكويشن. فانا بقيت بدور على حاجه بدل ما انا عمال اقرا وخلاص اللي هو هشوف هو عايز ايه. لا، انا اللي ببقى عايز حاجه دلوقتي. That's the part اللي we need to do whenever we're reading a question. دلوقتي عايزين نتشينج من ان هو ال question هو اللي بيدايركت مي اثينك ازاي افكر في انهي باث، لان انا اللي اختار الباث وادور على اللي انا عايزه عشان افل الباث ده. لما الاقي كلمه لينير احنا بنفكر في سلوب، وانا عارف حافظ حاجات السلوب y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1، حافظ y equals mx plus b، حافظ انه في حاجه اسمها الواي انترسبت الاكس بتاعتها بزيرو، الاكس انترسبت الواي بتاعتها بزيرو، الحاجات دي. فبدور على الحاجات اللي في الان في اللي انا اعرفه، واشوف بقى اللي بعد ما احط الجيفنز في اللي انا اعرفه في حاجه جديده اعرف اطلعها وخلاص. and then اشوف هو كان عايز ايه. بس most of the time you'll find ان هو عايز الحاجه اللي انت اوريدي جبتها. لو ما حصلتش بالمنظر ده هتلاقي ان انت خلاص يو اوريدي جوت تو، يا اما اكتر من اللي هو عايزه، يا اما هتعمل وان مور ستيب تقعد على اللي انت جبته بس حسب اللي هو عايزه. الثوت اللي انا بحكيها دي these are the process. This is how the problem solving of any issue works عامة. Does this make sense شوية؟ نجرب كده بليز في بارت 2 بقى. احنا we took too much time عن ال expected، فشكلنا كده هنعمل بارت 1 و 2 و 3 بس. بارت 2 الايدياز هي بتاعت او it uses نفس الهنتس والتريكس بتاعت الحاجات اللي فاتت، وزياده عليها حته او زياده عليها بحاجه مختلفه او كده. فدايما think بنفس الطريقه اللي احنا لسه عاملينها حالا. يعني try to always update بسرعه the way you're thinking of questions. بالاول حاجه تشوفوها جديده غيروا على طول الطريقه دي، حاولوا تجربوها على طول حتى if it failed، حتى if it didn't get you an answer that's correct، بس keep trying the new method على طول. Okay. 7 minutes part. So أول واحدة they gave you a line وclearly ال 3 points اللي محطوطين دول على on the same line، و they told you that b كمان is equals to 2a and then they're asking what is the value of a. and then هشيل ال b واحط مكانها 2a and then I'll use الidea بتاعت إن أي 3 points على نفس اللاين if I used any 2 points it would come up with the same thing. فهناخد ال 2 points دول اللي هما ال P والبوينت دي ونعمل منهم نحسب منهم السلوب. نعمل 2a minus 0 over a minus 5، وأقول إن ده المفروض يكون equal للسلوب من ال 2 points التانيين اللي هما ال P برضو ومعاها دي. فهقول هنا 2a برضو بس minus 3 over a minus 0. I try to simplify if possible. 2a minus 0 دي مثلا هتبقى 2a خلاص، و a minus 5 هتفضل زي ما هي a minus 5. 2a minus 3 as it is. a minus 0 will become a. And then أي وقت بيكون عندي fractions equals to each other كده I cross multiply. So 2a times a that's 2a power 2 equals وهنا عندي a minus 5 و 2a minus 3. This would be a long thing. لا. Instead عندي فكرة أحلى. اوكي معلش نرجع تاني few steps. بدل ما هحسب السلوب انا حسبت من دول خلاص اللي هو 2a، حسبت من الاثنين البلو. اوكي now بدل ما هحسب السلوب من p و0 و3 هحسب السلوب التاني من دي ودي because هما كلهم knowns ما فيهمش اي unknowns، فهيطلع لي بنمبر. يعني هعمل 0 minus 3 over 5 minus 0, which now will give me an equation that doesn't have letters on both sides. هيبقى فيها letters في ناحية واحدة. 2a minus 0 is just a 2a و a minus 5 as it is over negative 3 over 5. دلوقتي هكروس multiply فهيطلع لي 5 times 2a اللي هي 10a equals negative 3 times a اللي هي negative 3a وبعدين negative 3 times negative 5 positive 15. اجمع الحاجات اللي فيهم ايهات مع بعض فيبقى عندي 13a equals 15، بعدين هودي ال 13 بالديفيجن فتبقى a equals 15 over 13. This is the answer. طيب I'll repeat it بس عايز highlight a few things. One of the most important things that happened what I just did واحنا بنحل اللي هو adapting and changing your method midway. This will not ever happen ولا you'll never be able to do طول ما you're not writing things down. You won't be able to go back a step ever. لو بنفكر في الستبس في دماغنا ونكتب numbers بس as notes you'll never be able to do that. What's important اصلا انك to make sure طول ما احنا ماشيين في الستبس بتاعتنا is it going well ولا انا في حاجه هتبتدي تعك قوي. Why did I stop in the middle? I stopped when I found ان انا كده هيطلع لي 2 brackets فيهم ahead ولما اجي اعملهم times بعد هيبقى فيهم power 2 الموضوع هيجت too complicated. قلت خلاص I can then use 2 other points عشان ما يبقاش فيه a's كتير قوي في الايكويشن كده. So let's go through what happens again. انا خدت point الاول p with this point here to get the slope and I got this اللي بالازرق and then خدت ال 2 points التانيين اللي هما 0 و 3 ومعاها ال 5 و 0 ليه؟ علشان ما يبقاش في اي letters في الموضوع وجبت منهم السلوب اللي هو طلع بنيجاتيف 3 over 5. اول ما بقى عندي fraction equals fraction خلاص بقت equation عادي. I'll cross multiply and I did cross multiply moved الحاجات اللي فيها A مع بعض في نفس الناحية بقت A ناحية واحدة بس لحد ما جبت ال A بكام. Does this make sense? طيب نتشيك number 7 table of values بيقول لي this is a linear thing so أول ما هشوف linear هفكر في slope. Which of the following represents the function? Clearly دول كلهم linear functions. So قلنا slope يبقى هجيب السلوب ده minus ده over ده minus ده 0 minus 2 over 2 minus 1 هيطلع لي negative 2 as the slope. لما ابص على التشويسز هو one choice بس اللي فيها السلوب بنيجاتيف 2 دي السلوب بتاعها نيجاتيف 1 غلط دي السلوب بتاعها 2 غلط دي السلوب بتاعها 1 غلط يبقى هي بي اكيد هي الانسر الصح. and that's it كده كده. وكده كده في الاول خالص من الجيفن ما دام اداني الاكس بزيرو انا عارف كويس قوي ان ده هيطلع الواي انترسبت عشان كده الانسرز كلها الواي انترسبت بتاعتها 4 اهو عادي. Does this make sense? We're good?
Yes, yes.
Now this is a very important one. If this is a linear function clearly بيقول لي if the Fahrenheit temperature increased by 27 what is the degree increase in Celsius? هنا I cannot substitute مكان ال F27. I can't do that because they did not ask for what is the Celsius degree when the Fahrenheit degree is 27. That's not the question. The question is when I increase the Fahrenheit 27 the increase that will happen في Celsius قد ايه? So whenever we're talking about the increase قلنا this is one of the key words of the slope actually. لأن السلوب is considered as we said اللي هو rise over run. وانا لسه قايل لكم ان الرايز اوفر ران ان هو يعتبر التشينج ان y over the change in x. So السلوب بتاع الايكويشن دي دلوقتي حالا اللي هو 9 over 5 ده already بيريبريزنت التشينج in y وده already بيريبريزنت التشينج in x. الاكس هنا عندي هي السي يبقى هنا ده التشينج in سلسيوس وهنا ده التشينج in فahrenheit صح؟ So what does that برضو mean? It means إن كل ما الX تزيد 5 الY بتزيد 9. With every 5 increase on the X, the Y increases by 9. So I can use this to get the same increase that they're asking for because they want an increase in the Fahrenheit اللي هي Y to become 27. وعايز يعرف التشينج في الاكس اللي هي السلسيوس هيبقى قد ايه. So I can cross multiply with this change. I can say 27 times 5 and then divide by 9. That would be the answer, which is 15. So if the Fahrenheit increased by 27, whatever the Fahrenheit is يعني مثلا لو الفahrenheit 2 degrees Fahrenheit فلو زودت من 2 خليتها 29 يعني زودتها 27 whatever السلسيوس اللي كان طالع هيزيد 15. So as long as I'm talking على ال change in x وال change in y التغيير اللي بيحصل increase قد ايه decrease قد ايه for every x في قد ايه y بتزيد والكلام ده يبقى انا بتكلم على السلوب نفسه. يعني هيوز السلوب نفسه because السلوب is considered التشينج بتاع الواي over التشينج بتاع الاكس وانا من الايكويجن نفسها هعرف مين فيهم الاكس ومين فيهم الواي السلسيوس هي الاكس ولا الفahrenheit هي الاكس. it depends على الايكويجن اللي معمول تايمز السلوب اللي هو الرقم ده كده يعتبر الاكس وده كده اكيد يعتبر الواي. therefore عرفت ان اللي فوق ده بتاع الفahrenheit عشان كده حطيت ال 27 فوق مع الفahrenheit وعرفت ان اللي تحت ده بتاع السلسيوس عشان كده لما حبيت اطلع الجيفن حطيت الاكس اللي هي الانون اللي سوري مش الجيفن الانون حطيتها مع الاكس اللي هي السلسيوس وعملت كروس مالتيبليكيشن and I got the answer. Does that make sense? Are you sure يا جماعة؟ Okay. So the idea again is the following. When I started reading the question, it says if the Fahrenheit temperature increased by something. So, and they want to know what would be the increase in Celsius. So they don't want to know what would be the degree Celsius exactly when this Fahrenheit is given. That's not what they want to know. If this was the case, I would substitute. But this is not what they want to know. They want to know the increase in this and the increase in that, which means they need to know the change. This triangle here means the change. They need to know the change in X when a change of 27 happens to the Y. I realized that I needed to use the slope على طول. Whenever I read the increase أصلا pair something, this is one of the keywords of the slope. So I started writing the slope اللي هو 9/5. I wrote it there. I realized that the 9 stands for the Fahrenheit because the Fahrenheit is the Y. Well, 5 stands for the Celsius because the Celsius is the X. So when they asked me to put 27 Fahrenheit, I put it next to the Fahrenheit. They want to know the Celsius, so I'm looking for this X now. So I was able to cross multiply because this fraction must be equals to this one. Whatever the change that happens here must be equals to the same change that happens there. So cross multiply and you'll get your answer. Does this make sense or did I get you confused?
No, it makes sense.
100% sure, okay? ماشي. طيب. Moving on to this. This uses the exact same idea that we just discussed now. It says if P is increased by 35, what is the increase in K? P represents the Y and K represents the X. How did I know? Because according to the equation, this is the same form as Y equals mx plus B. So clearly this is the X and this is the Y. طيب. When they talked in this increased by this much, well, they want to know the increase, so I thought of the slope. Because of the word of increase, I thought of the slope. So what is the slope? It's 7/12. We just said that the 7 stands for the P, which is the Y, and the 12 stands for the K, which is the X. This is supposed to be equals to, they want now P to be equals to 35. What would be the value of this? So I'll cross multiply. 12 times 35 divided by 7. This would give me the answer 60 right away. That's the answer. Makes sense? ولا لا? Perfect. This is one of the hardest questions because actually it doesn't, it's using something called the distance formula, which is derived from the slope. But this is an important formula anyway. So this formula is used to find the distance between any 2 points whatsoever. Okay? The distance formula is the following. Square root كبير جواه rise power 2 plus run power 2. يعني ايه؟ square root كبير y2 minus y1 because that's the rise power 2 plus x2 minus x1. جاي من السلوب شويه. So السلوب بيكون rise over run. الديستنس rise power 2 plus run power 2 under the square root. طيب how can I use the distance formula here? It says that this circle has a radius of 5. So the center of this circle, if this distance is 5, and this distance as well is 5 because this is a radius, so then this means that this point here is at the coordinates 5 and 5. That's أول حاجة, that's the first thing I figured out using بس فكرة إن radius is equals to 5. The center of this circle must be at the point 5 and 5. طيب what else? Because the radius is 5, then this distance must be 5 as well. From the center to any point on the circle is the radius. So this must be 5 as well. So I'll use this point and the distance formula to get that what's missing. Because the distance between this point, which is 8 and t, and the other point, which is 5 and 5, the distance should be equals to 5. So I'll apply the distance rule. I'll say t minus 5, y2 minus y1 power 2, plus x2 minus x1, 8 minus 5 power 2, under the square root, should be equals to the 5 that they asked me, or that they told me the radius is equals to. Now I'll solve this equation. In order to remove the power of the root, I'll power 2 on the other side. I'll have t minus 5 to the power of 2, plus 8 minus 5, which is 3. 3 power 2 will become 9, equals 5 power 2, which is 25. I'll move the 9 to the other side. This will give me t power minus 5 power 2 equals 16. I'll get the square root of 16 to remove the power of 2, which will be 4. I'll move the 5 to the other side and it will get me 9 as the answer. That's the value of t, 9. Does this make sense? Of course. طبعا. طيب. First, before we start discussing it, let's make sure and we realize and 100% are okay with the distance formula. The distance formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Let's read by the whole question and figure out how did we come up with everything here. There. They said that this is a circle, and that circle is tangent, which means it touches the line L and the line, the x-axis and the y-axis. So it touches here, it touches there, and it touches there. They also said that the radius of the circle is 5. Because they said that the radius is 5, and because they said this is tangent, I know that any circle must have a center. This distance from the center to this point is radius, and this distance is also a radius, which means that this distance is 5 and this distance is 5, which means that this coordinate here on the x is 5 and this coordinate here is 5, which also means that the center of the circle is at the coordinates 5 on the x, 5 on the y. Until this point, any issues? Right. Now, how to move next? According to the idea of a circle أصلا, the distance from the center to any point on the circumference of the circle is called a radius, which then means that this is a radius, which means that the distance here is 5. The length here, the distance is 5. So now I have 2 points that I know the distance of. So I'll use the rule that I know for the distance. How do I find the distance between any 2 points? I have the point 8 and t, and I have the other point as 5 and 5. So when I'm trying to find the distance, I'm supposed to do y2 minus y1 in a bracket to the power of 2, plus x2 minus x1 to the bracket in a bracket to the power of 2. Yes, Yanin?
Wouldn't it be 5 take away t2?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which point you start with. If you started with the t minus 5, then you have to start with the 8 minus the 5. That's why here I started with 8 minus 5. but if you wanted to go as 5 minus t, then it would have to be 5 minus 8 in the other bracket. Okay?
Okay.
That's the first thing. The second thing, in the and only in the distance formula, it doesn't matter at all because anyway it will be to the power of 2, which means even if it's negative, it will become positive. Type. All of this must be equals to 5, which is the radius distance or the length of the radius. So I have an equation. Let's try to solve the equation. Before I start solving it, I'll simplify wherever possible. So I'll calculate this. 8 minus 5 is 3. 3 power 2 is 9. And all of this is still under the root equals 5. Now, in order to remove the square root, I'll put a power of 2 to the other side. So I'll remove this and I'll change this to 25. I'll then move 9 to the other side. So I have t minus 5 to the power of 2 equals 25 minus 9, which is 16. In order to remove the power of 2, I'll square root the other side. That would get me 4. I then need to move the negative 5 to the other side, and that would get me the value of t, which is 9. Makes better sense, Shoya?
Yes.
Perfect. I'll stop here now, but this is too much for today. I know. I'm sorry. I'd like you to try best P3 as a homework. Now it should make better sense, and it's very similar to what we've done. It's a combination of both forms, part 1 and part 2. So that's your homework. Very similar, f of, and then a graph of a point with a table, just like the AB one that we solved earlier, another table, A plus B, just like the previous one. You're given a point on the line and you're missing a y coordinate. That's the homework for next class. Is that okay?
Yes. بس أنا عندي سؤال.
طبعا.
هو يعني أنا كنت عايزة أعرف على حصص يوم